Joining us now, a man who knows a little bit about the efficacy of tariffs when used properly, is Pat Buchanan, who's been writing about the death of American manufacturing, the death of the West for decades. And we were beginning to think, Pat Buchanan, that would never have a president who would see the world as you see it, as I've seen it, and I see it. America really is the last best hope of freedom. But if China becomes a dominant superpower, then guess what? Freedom is out the window. Pat Buchanan, it's good to have you with us.
Delighted to be here, and there's no question about it. You mentioned China. At the beginning of the 21st century, China had a smaller economy than Italy, and now its economy comparable, and not as large, but getting there, as large as the United States of America. And how did it do it? It did it on mercantilism and protectionism and maintaining its manufacturing base and bringing manufacturing in and selling its goods abroad at less than world prices to make them. So, I mean, this is the way all great nations have risen. And what I think Trump is trying to do, I agree with him 100%. I do think they need to explain the strategy and the long-term strategy of what they are doing more and why they are doing it and how they are doing it and how they're going to proceed rather than be ad hoc. But he's had these aluminum and steel tariffs in mind for a long time.
Well, and I think he sent Peter Navarro out and Wilbur Ross and he himself, they have given quite a few speeches on how the aluminum glut that was fueled in part by China, but in part by Germany as well. The glut of aluminum and the subsidies to the aluminum industry had resulted over the years in the destruction of, almost the total destruction of American steel manufacturing. And as a national security matter, he said, we cannot give up our manufacturing of steel. Can't do it.
Well, that's exactly right. And here's what the Chinese do. Look, the Chinese, they produce steel, then they start to be able to produce enough for their own market and keep out foreign steel. Right. Then they continue to produce the steel and dump it on the world markets in order to capture the world markets, in order to bring down the companies in the West and in the United States. And once you sink all those companies by selling your steel at less than cost, then you got the world market. Then you can control the prices, and then you've got a strategic world asset.
Well, and I think what the establishment and the GOP seems to be upset by is that, well, they're upset that I guess Goldman Sachs is unhappy, and they don't want any impediments.
Well, look, Goldman Sachs and all these transnational companies. I mean, and many of these many transnational companies. Their loyalty is to their bottom line rather than to their country, and they are happy to shut down production in the United States where you don't have to pay U.S. wages and follow U.S. environmental and civil rights and health and safety laws, and produce in places like China and Southeast Asia and Central America, and bring the goods back to the United States, and then sell them at the highest prices you can get in the world, and you pocket the difference. I mean, it is in the interests of many of these companies, frankly, to produce in third world countries rather than the United States, but that is not in the interest of the American people. The interest of the country and the interest of the people, and on the other side, the interest of these transnational corporations began to split a long time ago. And I get Trump as an economic patriot.
This is what Charles Lane said from the Washington Post on Fox last night.
He is shredding or threatening to shred 70 years worth of American policy, starting in the GATT arrangement that began in 1948. He views these as zero-sum arrangements in which the United States has been getting the short end of the stick, and he's going to change that coercively. This will have a long-term effect on what had traditionally been very close partnerships. They may negotiate a way out of it, but these relationships will never be quite the same.
He is not entirely wrong here. I mean, Eisenhower, however, Eisenhower threw open America's markets to European and Japanese goods and to enable them basically to dump all their cheap goods in the United States and rise to their feet again. But that should have stopped in 1960. Now, since the last 25 years, Laura, the United States has been running the largest trade deficits in world history, a total of $12 trillion in trade deficits, $4 trillion of that with China. And the result of it is the export of America's manufacturing and technology and jobs and all the rest of it to the world as the United States diminishes and countries like China predominantly rise and grow and grow. It's what we did to the British in the 19th century. So Charles Lane is right, but the question is the United States, are we simply a part of a world economy, or is the United States its own national economy? And do our vital interests come first, and are they paramount? And are we willing to sacrifice to maintain and to restore the greatest manufacturing base to give us self-sufficiency out into the indefinite future? So these are the great questions I would like to, I'd like to hear the administration really speak on more and more deeply.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, raising that question of if we just wait and keep doing the things that we've been doing before that help China amass this a huge stockpile of surpluses and then subsidize all these big manufacturing bases and so forth. If we wait, then what happens to freedom? I mean, the idea of okay, China's going to be able to come here and buy anything they want and buy all these technology companies and buy all these big manufacturing companies in the United States and then that's just going to be all hunky-dory. People don't understand. Once China becomes the dominant economic and military power, all bets are off for freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of association, all that's out the window.
Yeah, when we did it, we did this ourselves in the 19th century from about Lincoln's time with his Morrill tariffs all the way through to about 1914. We started the period half the size of Great Britain. By 1914, the United States economy is more than twice the size. The Germans, who were under Bismarck, who adopted what they called the American system, they had exceeded Britain. But it's one thing for Great Britain to yield up primacy in the world to the United States, which is, as Bismarck said, the very fact that the two speak English is a pretty significant factor, and you got a free America and a free Britain. But if you yield up primacy to China in the world economy, and China becomes the dominant power, they don't look like they share the political values of Ramsey Clark.
Well, I think that, again, people like John Boehner will play the soundbite for you from him. This is the old guard. The old guard their policies have been exposed by Trump, and new alliances are forming, and new ways of thinking. Even Tom Friedman the other day, Pat said I think it was on Morning Joe or one of the shows, he said, well, the Democrats have missed the boat on some things, like political correctness on college campus has gotten crazy. He's like, well, and we obviously can't let everybody into the country who wants to come. This is Tom Friedman. He said, and also China is taking advantage of us. I'm thinking, wait a second, he sounds like Buchanan here. Tom Friedman. It's just hilarious. I mean, someone like him, when he's recognizing the divide. But this is John Boehner yesterday. Let's listen.
I want to talk to you about what's happened with the Republican Party.
There is no Republican Party. There's the Trump Party. The Republican Party is kind of taking a nap somewhere. Donald Trump, who I know well, was one of my supporters. When I was Speaker, I was having a rough week. Trump would call me, pat me on the back, cheer me up. We played a lot of golf together. But President, really? I never quite saw this. But the guy ran, the guy won.
It's
Boehner talks about the Republican Party. But, and I heard this morning, listening on TV, people were talking, this isn't the Republican tradition. Look, the old great Republican tradition was economic nationalism. Republican presidents built the great American economy from 1860 to 1930. They built it. As for what they call isolationism, it really merely meant staying out of foreign wars where we don't have any vital interest imperiled. That was the Republican tradition. Immigration laws. The immigration laws were written when Republicans controlled the country. I mean, and they were fairly strict in many cases, maybe too strict, people say. But these ideas predate even the great John Boehner. there were things going on in this world before Boehner became Speaker.
But when he said, "Well, the Republican Party is taking a nap," I mean, it's Trump's party. Trump's party. I'm like, thank God.
Their party they're talking about, of course, it is in a sense it's Richard Nixon's party, and to a degree it was Reagan's party. But there was the what they call populism is very much traditionalism, and very much old republicanism. In the ideas that Trump is espousing and is seized upon because the new ideas weren't working.
Yeah, I mean, again, if America had not amassed all this debt and trade deficits and people hadn't gotten despondent.
If we're running $500 billion in trade surpluses, I would say, look, the guys in NAFTA I opposed and the guys in WTO I opposed, they were right and I was wrong. But now they will not even admit they were wrong despite $12 trillion in trade deficits. If they had said that we're liable to risk that, they would never have passed any of these trade bills.
No, and I think
how do those Republicans think when all of those guys in the 90s we opposed to year in, every year voted for MFN for China, then what do they call it, normal trade relations with China, all these things to enable China, and then brought them into the WTO with the Republicans and the Bushites and the whole gang. They did it. They built up, and that monster of China that you see today is the baby of the Republican Party free traders.
That's the soundbite of the day so far. Pat Buchanan here on the Laura Ingraham Show.
Maybe even beat out Roseanne.
Pat, don't you like hearing the left talk about values now and culture and like, oh, the culture now is Donald Trump's ruined the culture.
His culture. I don't want to get into the culture.
But Donald, it is hilarious that they said, well, Donald Trump's made the culture toxic.
Well, they said Buchanan started the culture war.
That's right. That RNC
he launched a war in this country. We had one delegate on the platform committee, and we launched a cultural war.
Oh no, that was hilarious. By the way, Italy's populists are rising up. Steve Bannon's over there helping the Italians in Rome. He's working on that.
He's bringing his healing touch to the process.
But
I must say, look, again, people say, they call all these names. They say, Buchanan, a populist, a racist, all these other things, tribalist. And I said, look, fellas, those guys are looking across the Mediterranean, and people are coming across from other countries, other religions, other beliefs, other values, other races and things, pouring into their country. There's going to be a reaction. And the tribalism you see in Scotland and Catalonia and all of these things built up, and they denounced the people that simply recognized it. Why didn't they deal with it? They got two populist parties in power in Italy because they refuse to deal with what everybody sees. And they don't deliver any results. They just moan and gripe. Oh my Lord, look at that guy in Hungary. Look what he's saying and doing. Why didn't they deal with something over there?
Pat Buchanan, it's so great to talk to you, hear your voice, hear your analysis, as always. And our guy Dinesh D'Souza gets the pardon, Pat.
Yeah, the partner's tale.
They're all horrified by that. They didn't care about Mark Rich, but that was fine. But Dinesh D'Souza, that was an outrage. Just ridiculous.
Well, I think, also Martha Stewart, and look, Blagojevich, I don't know, what are they going to put him in the electric jail because he wanted to trade Obama's seat for a big deal for himself? Look at Earl Warren endorsed Dwight Eisenhower and got Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, he neither sought a bribe nor received a bribe, and they try to get him on the bribery. That's another big scandal.
Okay, if you convict the guy, you give him a punishment, but what did they give him? 14 years or something?
No, 14 years. Trump will pardon him. That entire case was another travesty, and I'm not a big fan of his for obvious reasons. I don't like him, but that is just another example of prosecutorial abuse and overreach. Patrick Fitzgerald, Jim Comey's attorney, was the one who did that. Went after Conrad Black and went after Blagojevich. Pat Buchanan on the Laura Ingraham Show.